Welcome to the Navigating Gender workshop. Before we begin, there are two things that you're going to need. Links to both of these are in the description. But first, you're going to be needing the Navigating Gender packet. It looks like this. And then you are also going to be needing the Terms You May Not Know packet, which looks like this. What this workshop is exactly what it sounds like. It is a workshop for navigating gender. This workshop is designed for people who are questioning their gender identity or gender expression, or simply, questioning themselves and want to learn more about both of these things. So I am also going to be reading certain passages from this workshop. You can read along with me or follow along. And then there's also a PowerPoint presentation that goes along with this workshop that is also linked in the description if you'd like to have that open in a separate tab or in a split screen so you can follow along. So starting off with me and introductions, my name is Aislinn Alexander Kent. My pronouns are he, him. I am a gay transgender man. I have been out as transgender for about 7 years, and I consider myself, someone who likes to educate others. I'm very open. I'm very honest. If at any point during this presentation or at the end of this presentation you have questions or things that you're unsure about, you can feel free to email me or reach out to me on social media. Those things are, again, part of the PowerPoint, and you can feel free to look at that. That link is in the description as well. So first, we're going to start off with group norms. These are things that usually apply to, in-person spaces and therapy groups, but, this is a workshop nonetheless. So I'm going to go over the group norms, which is page 1 of the packet. A baseline of understanding. This is not a space to question the so-called legitimacy of transgender individuals. Coming into this space, you should already be aware and acknowledge the reality that transgender people exist. That is not up for debate, and if you had entered this space thinking otherwise, then you're simply in the wrong place. Group norm number 2, a baseline of respect. This is not a space for self-hate. The purpose of this workshop is to provide a space where individuals can explore their gender safely without fear or persecution or prejudice, hence why this is a virtual workshop. This extends to how you speak to yourself. Allow yourself grace and kindness, and the same kind that you would give others on their journey. This is a safe space and a brave space. This is a safe space, meaning that this is a space where individuals can be assured that they are safe from harassment or cruelty, but this is also a brave space, meaning that you are free to ask questions, get things wrong, and be honest. Brave spaces encourage dialogue and unfiltered understanding. Privacy and confidentiality. You will not be forced to disclose any personal or self-identifying information during this workshop. If you have a desire to disclose such information, then you are free to do so, but I will not ask it of you, and you should be aware of the risks that come with disclosing your own personal information in open forums. Finally, digital distractions. I would encourage you to put away your phone and silence it for the duration of this workshop, as well as close any non-essential tabs in your web browser. This workshop is important, and you may find the experience more worthwhile if you limit distractions. So moving on, there are definitely several passages in the Navigating Gender workshop packet that I'm not going to be reading, verbatim. One of these is, navigating gender. I think this is a really important passage. I think it's really important to read and understand. But right now we're going to be moving on to gender versus sex and talking about the educational portion of that. So first and foremost, something to understand is that gender and sex are not the same. Sex being, one's biological characteristics, and gender being someone's state of being a man, woman, non-binary, or any variations thereupon. So talking about sex specifically, sex is a spectrum. It's not actually binary like a lot of people think. Sex is made up of 5 distinct characteristics, none of which are guaranteed to exist in congruence. Sex as a binary experience is common, but that does not make it universal or even normal. It is easier to think of the world in binary terms, but just because something is easier to understand does not mean that understanding is correct. And in your packet, it goes over the 5 characteristics of sex and how all of those are different. And like I said, there are all of these different characteristics, and they might not all line up in the typical binary way that we are taught about in school. And like I mentioned, sex for a majority of people is a binary experience, but that is not the case for everyone. And then that is not normal. That is just majority. So moving away from what is sex, talking about what is gender. Again, in this packet, there is a great little description and little, reading that you can do there. But in general, the way I like to think about it is gender is a way to self-identify. It is a way to attach words to the way that you experience yourself and your consciousness and your own reality. And again, this packet goes into a lot more detail. I'm going to leave that up to you guys to read, experience in your own time. But gender, can be male or female. There's also variation. It can be non-binary. It can be agender. There are a lot of different gender identities. And we're going to go a little bit more into those in a bit. But right now, we're going to be going over the gender exploration. This is similar to the gender unicorn, the genderbread person. These are all very similar things. But in your packet, you should have something like this without the black boxes. And it talks about, gender identity, assigned sex at birth, and gender expression. And so if you're following along in the presentation, there is a slide there. And then the next slide is me, how I experience and explore my identity. So for me, as far as identifying, gender wise, I identify wholly as a man. I don't identify in any bit with womanhood, and I don't identify, outside of the binary. As far as sex assigned at birth, I was assigned female at birth. So that's kind of the little box that I've checked. And as far as expression, a lot of my expression is masculine. Most of the clothes that I wear are bought in the men's section at stores. I have facial hair, a low voice, traditional man's haircut. But there are parts of me that are feminine. I do wear jewelry. I have feminine expression. There are some clothes that I own that are from the women's section. So that kind of is an explanation of expression. Going through your packet, there are different examples of how different people might, fill out this chart based on their own identity. There are ones for cisgender men and women, binary transgender men and women, people who are agender, genderqueer, all of these different kinds of things. And then as you continue to go through that, you'll get to a section about identity, and then the X, the third option that is outside of man and woman. Here, the X is symbolic of a myriad of possibilities. It could, for some, represent identifying with a third gender that is outside and not relation to the notion of womanhood or manhood. The identity could stop there, as third gender is a prominent gender identity. The X continuum shown here could also be applied to gender fluid, genderqueer, transfeminine, and transmasculine identities. All of these identities are not binary in nature, and there could be parts of the aforementioned identities that are comprised of a third gender. However, X in this situation is also representative of any gender that is tied to a non-Eurocentric gender. This could be the Hydra, also referred to as the Kinar Kinir of India, the two-spirited people of indigenous North America, the Mahu of native Hawaii, or any other culturally specific gender. Gender is messy, it's complicated, and it cannot easily be defined. Does that not make it real? No. Just because something is complicated and cannot easily be put into a box does not make it false. It just makes it liminal. So moving on, from gender identities outside of that, there is the gender tree. And this kind of goes over gender as a concept. So you start at the top, you have gender, and then there are people who are cisgender and transgender, cisgender men, cisgender women, people who identify with the gender that they were assigned at birth. And then under transgender, you have binary transgender experiences. These are transgender men and women. And then you have non-binary, which goes on to that next page in your packet. There are people who feel they don't have a gender, that they not even that they feel they don't have a gender, that they don't have gender. Gender does not apply to them, and this is agender. And then there are also, people who are non-binary but do affiliate themselves with some kind of gender. And this could be, semi-binary, people who are transfeminine, transmasculine, kind of vibe or identify with the notions of male or female, but not in totality. And then there are non-binary, completely non-binary gender identities like genderqueer. There are a lot of great resources in the Terms You May Not Know packet that goes into lots of different terms, a lot of different ways you can identify, a lot of different experiences that have been cataloged through language. And you might find that, in reading certain words or, different identities, that explains how you feel, that explains your identity. And that's kind of what, this workshop is about. There are educational portions to this, of course, but the education is meant to help guide you in your own journey and navigating yourself and, understanding yourself better and loving yourself for who you are. So this is a quote from Kimberly Crenshaw. "Identity isn't simply a self-contained unit. It is a relationship between people and history, people and communities, people and institutions." What Kimberly's talking about specifically in this quote is intersectionality. But I think also this quote really applies well to gender. Gender isn't a self-contained unit. It's not just this one thing that is separate from everything else. It is a relationship. It is fluid. It is an active thing. And how you feel about gender, how you feel about your body, how you express yourself is a relationship between yourself, your history, your culture, your community, institutions around you. It's all very complex, and that's why this workshop exists. It is complex, and it is not cut and dry, and it's something that requires self-reflection and learning and growth. And so that's why it's navigating gender, not deciding gender. If you're following along the PowerPoint presentation, at this point, you should reach the transgender celebrities slide. These are just some examples of transgender individuals in the media, in pop culture, to kind of give you a visual representation. These are people you've probably seen or heard of before, if not all of them, at least a few of them. Transgender people are often viewed as outcasts, viewed as others. They don't have a place in mainstream society. But here are people who are very successful and very well known, and they also are transgender, kind of shining a light on normalizing, transgender and non-binary experiences. So from left to right, we have Erin Phillip, who uses she, her pronouns, who is a transgender woman and American model. We have the musician and non-binary person Sam Smith, who uses they, them pronouns. There's Chella Mann, who is a genderqueer individual using he, him pronouns, and Chella is an activist and an artist. Moving on, we have Amanda Lesenberg, and she uses she, her pronouns. She is a non-binary woman and an American actress. She is most well known for playing Rue in the Hunger Games. We have Elliot Page, who recently came out. They use he and they pronouns. He is a non-binary person, as well as an actor and a producer. And then, of course, the ever-famous Laverne Cox, who is a transgender woman who uses she, her pronouns. And she's an American actress, very well known for her role in Orange is the New Black. So at this point in the workshop, if you're following along the PowerPoint, it says break. This is a time to take a break and think about, the things that we've already gone over, looking at the gender tree. If you haven't already, going back and filling out that expression page, and thinking about it, thinking, okay, right now, whether that changes in the future or not is totally fine. Right now, how do I feel in my identity? Do I feel like there are womany parts of me? Do I feel like there are, male parts of me? Do I feel like, there might be some non-binary or part of that X-axis continuum? What is your assigned sex, and how do you feel about that in relation to your personal sense of self and gender? And then right now, what is your expression? Right now, what kind of clothing or accessories or things do you do? Is that more on a feminine or masculine spectrum? So take some time, pause this video, and then when you come back, we'll be moving on. All right, so now that you're back, we're going to talk about gender expression, specifically talking about names and pronouns. This is a wonderful quote from Andrea Gibson. Your name is a gift. You can return it if it doesn't fit. Kind of keeping with this metaphor, if you get a gift, if you are given a present, if you like it, cool, that's great, that's awesome. Keep it. If you don't like it, you can also keep it. It's going to take up space in your house. It might be uncomfortable. It might be like, you know what, I don't really like this, but someone gave it to me, so I'm going to keep it. Or you can return it. And all of this is an adequate metaphor for your name. If the name your parents gave you when you were born, if you like it, totally keep it, use it, love it. If you don't like it, you can definitely keep it. You can go by that name and all of those kinds of things, but it might weigh you down. It might bring you discomfort. It might just be something that is a weight. But then you can also return it, or, in this case, use a different name, whether that means legally changing your name or not. You can choose a new name for yourself. The way a lot of people do this, they might ask friends, hey, what names do you think would be good for me, within this sphere, whether that's masculine or feminine, maybe non-binary. Some people ask their parents, if I had been assigned a different, sex at birth, what would you have named me? Some people look at baby registries and all of those kinds of things. But, if you don't like your name, you can change it. You have every right to change the name that you are called. In the same vein, we get into pronouns. There are lots of different pronouns that people can use. There are, of course, the traditional he, him, and she, her. There's also singular they. And then there are also neopronouns. And neopronouns is something I'll get into a little bit, but not a whole lot in this workshop. But, he, him, she, her, they, them. And then for this presentation, the neopronoun example that we're going to use is sie, ihr. So here is a sentence that uses pronouns pretty frequently, and here's what it sounds like with different pronouns. For he, him, his pronouns. He went to the store to get his prescription, then he drove himself home. For she, her, hers, she went to the store to get her prescription, then she drove herself home. They, them, theirs, they went to the store to get their prescription, then they drove themselves home. Z, zir, zirs, Z went to the store to get their prescription, then Z drove theirself home. When listening to these sentences, imagine you're the person going to the store, or, person going to the store to get your prescription and driving yourself home. Sit with that for a moment. What does that sound like as I go through each of those? The he, the she, the they, the Z. How does that feel when you listen to all of those? Just one feel, oh no, I wouldn't like hearing that in reference to myself, or no, that doesn't feel right. This is a way to kind of gauge what kind of pronouns might be a best fit for you. When I hear these sentences, for me personally, when I hear the he, him, his one, I'm like, cool. That could be about me. When I hear, she or they or Z, I'm kind of like, no, when I hear that, I assume someone's talking about someone else. I would never assume that they're talking about me. That doesn't feel comfy. That doesn't fit. And that is totally fine. Some people have multiple pronouns that fit for them. Some people don't have a pronoun preference at all. Some people are like, you can use whatever pronouns you want for me. And that's okay too. And that might be something that you discover in your, journey and experience. Kind of moving on from that, you have gender expression. This is honorifics and gendered language. Honorifics are things like Mr. or Miss. There's Miss, Ms., Mrs., Mr., Doctor. There's also gender neutral MX, which some people say mix, some people say mux. Either way, if someone is addressing you a letter, do you want it to say, Miss Delgado, Mr. Delgado, Mix Delgado? If you have a doctorate degree, you could be Dr. Delgado. And that's just an example name, obviously. But this is, another example of kind of the same line with pronouns and names. What sounds right? What fits right? What makes you comfortable? And you might not know right away. This is the same for name, pronouns, honorifics, the gendered language we're about to go over. You might not know. It might be something where you want to test it out, whether that's with friends in real life, whether that's with people online, whether that's just to yourself, trying these things out, saying, okay, how does that feel when I hear that? How does that feel when I say that? How do all of these things make me feel in reference to myself? Do they make me feel good? Do they make me feel bad? Am I kind of indifferent and don't really care? And then moving on to gendered language, people don't realize that outside of just, pronouns and names, there's a lot of gendered terminology, especially in the English language. So talking about language that is usually associated with more feminine or female aligned people, there's ma'am, girl, lady, beautiful, woman, pretty. And then there's language that is more associated with masculine or male identified people, boy, sir, guy, gentleman, handsome, man, all those kinds of words. And then there's some language that's kind of in the middle. Saying partner, oh, this is my partner, is very gender neutral. And dude, a lot of people use dude, in a colloquial, just kind of playful sense, as dude can be anybody, she's a dude, he's a dude, we're all dudes. Some people do see dude as more of a masculinely gendered word, and some people use it more neutrally. And again, with this gendered language, what sounds good to you? What makes you feel good in your body and in your mind? What feels affirming in that way? So moving on to this is, you should be at the words slide on the PowerPoint if you're following along. In your packet, there's also a words activity. And this is just a list of, different pronouns, honorifics, words, all of these kinds of things. There's a little key at the bottom that you can follow. Going through, take some time and look at this. Okay, if something feels right, saying it out loud, thinking about it, yes, I like how that sounds for me. But a little check. If it doesn't sound right, you're like, nope, I don't like that at all. You do the no. And if it's just like, that's okay. Like, it's not my favorite, but I don't mind it. It doesn't, make me upset. It doesn't make me feel wrong. Then you can just put a little dash of like, yeah, that's okay. And then there's also as slang. And so an explanation of this, I am a male person. I'm a transgender man. And so I usually prefer more masculine words to be associated with me. However, if someone as slang is calling me queen, like, yes, queen, like something like that, that's okay. I don't want, if for whatever reason we were talking about royalty, if someone referred to me as a queen in a legitimate sense and not in terms of slang, I think that's something that would be uncomfortable for me. Same with girl, if someone called me, oh, that's a girl, or he's a girl, or anything like that, that'd make me uncomfortable. But if someone's like, girl, then that's okay, as slang. And that, can change depending on the person. Certain people might have preferences, okay, I'm okay with this person or these people, friends using these words for me. But strangers, I'd prefer, they use, this kind of terminology. This is the kind of, energy I want to give out. And then on the PowerPoint, again, is an example of me and, how I feel. So you can see in there things that I'm not comfortable with, things I am, things that are okay, and things, like queen that I'm just like only as slang. So I definitely would recommend, at this point in the video, pausing, taking a minute and being like, okay, I'm going to fill out this activity, sit with yourself and think about it. Say things out loud, refer to yourself in the third person if you want. Maybe if you have a friend nearby, ask them to take turns, referring to you as different things and seeing how you feel and, make a note of that. This is another point where you can just take a little break, whether it's to fill out the words, word activity, just to get some water. I'd encourage you, stay hydrated, take a little break, take some time, think about the things that, I've talked about thus far, and then come back to the video when you're ready. So moving away from gender, we're going to talk about gender expression. And this is a little bit complicated. And this is also where some people, in their gender exploration journey kind of struggle. Just because you present or express a certain thing does not mean that's how you identify. I wear earrings, I have my septum pierced, sometimes I wear jewelry, I have rings. Some of that stuff is really associated with femininity. And that is part of my gender expression. I do have feminine parts of my gender expression, but I don't have feminine parts of my identity. I holistically identify and am male. But there are feminine parts of my expression. Now, that doesn't take away from the fact of my identity. And the same is true for anyone, watching this video and navigating their gender. Just because you might express in a certain way that society deems masculine or feminine, that does not take away from how you identify and what your gender truly is. So, there are always stereotypes, especially in, American society. We have the binary of feminine and masculine. Women have purses, wear dresses, jewelry, bikinis, makeup, long hair, all associated with women and femininity. Then you have men and masculinity, button-up shirts, shorts, certain cuts and things like that, haircuts, beards, wearing a tie, a wallet versus, a purse or a handbag, pockets, all of those kinds of things. It's very much viewed as a binary thing. And some people find a lot of comfort in that, whether that is someone who's transgender, non-binary, cisgender, there is comfort in sticking to, one or the other. Oh, I only like feminine expression. I like masculine expression. And there's totally nothing wrong with that. We're going to talk a little bit more about feminine and masculine expression in just a little bit. But moving on right now, we're also going to talk about mannerisms and physicality. So when it comes to talking, there are different ways that male children and female children, or male assigned children and female assigned children, are taught. So, if you're on the phone, let's say you're ordering a pizza, someone who is socialized as a female who was assigned female at birth might be like, yes, hi, like I'd like to order a pizza. Your voice goes up, it's a lot softer, whereas someone who is, socialized as a male child might be like, hi, I'm calling to order a pizza. It's a lot more monotone, it's deeper, it's flat. And there are different, vocal things that are associated with genders. This seems very strange. Why do we let society dictate how someone is going to talk based off of their genitalia? That's very strange. But if you are a transgender person, if you want, either society to perceive you as a different gender, stereotypically, or if there are certain characteristics that you were raised with that you're not comfortable with, look at those around you. Look at how, cis women act at the grocery store. Look at how cis men act at the grocery store. See the different social interactions and all of these different things. And you notice that there are differences. And there are also plenty of videos, about voice training and things like that, that I would definitely recommend looking up. But this is something to keep in mind when it comes to your gender exploration. It's like, okay, I'm, wearing the clothes I want. I'm using, the language that I want, but something might make me uncomfortable. Something I might want to change about myself to make myself more comfortable in my body. It might be your voice patterns, your voice characteristics. Same with mannerisms. The most common example of this is crossing your knees or your ankles versus sitting with your legs straight or slightly open. Different socializations of physicality and body movement based on, the sex assigned at birth. And so for me, I think I have a combination of those kinds of things. I talk a lot with my hands, as you can very clearly see throughout this video. Sometimes I do cross my legs. Sometimes I sit with my legs apart. Sometimes, my voice goes up. Sometimes my voice goes down. because I am a transgender man and an effeminate man who was also raised and socialized as a woman, I have a combination of all of these characteristics. And again, just like, with your voice, look at other people's characteristics, look at the grocery store and social settings at bars, if you're old enough to go to a bar, obviously, things like that. See how different people of different gender expressions and identities interact. And you might find drawn to certain expressions, or might feel drawn to certain voice characteristics. And that is totally fine. Practice, retrain yourself, do all of these kinds of things, and they might help you feel better with your gender identity as part of your gender exploration. So going back to binary gender and its expectations, this is falling into the category, and if you're following along on the PowerPoint, this is the doing gender slide, where it's like, okay, as a transgender man, a lot of people expect me to fit myself into the box of manhood, do all of the male voice characteristics, physical characteristics, look like a man, dress like a man, use all masculine words and all of these things. The same as expectation is put on transgender women or trans feminine people. This is called doing gender. If something doesn't feel comfortable, but doing it instead to be perceived correctly, doing gender as an act. But in actuality, femininity does not equal womanhood, and masculinity does not equal manhood. And something that's important to note, and something that might be useful, is the gender expression page of your packet. It looks like this. With that, you can be extremely feminine. You can wear dresses and makeup and have long hair, but that does not make you a woman. You can still be a non-binary person. You can still be a transgender man. The same thing with masculinity. A classic example of this is that a lot of people are familiar with masculine lesbians. It seems to be more accepted for women to be masculine versus men to be feminine. And that is due to a myriad of different societal things. But everyone is familiar with the idea of a masculine lesbian, but that does not make that woman any less of a woman or any less of a lesbian. And, the same is true for everyone of every gender and sexuality. This is a wonderful quote by a non-binary individual. "Every aspect of myself was analyzed as either masculine or feminine. There was no in between and nothing outside of these two options." This is a quote from Alok Menon, who you actually will see on this next slide if you're following along with the PowerPoint. This is an amazing, amazing individual. They use a combination of feminine and masculine presentation, as well as, a mix of culture as well in their presentation, gender-wise, and it is amazing. And they are living proof that gender is a construct in many ways when it comes to clothing, how you present yourself, body hair, voice, mannerisms, all of these things. They're all constructed and put into these two categories when in actuality, the human experience is diverse and cannot just be pushed into column A or column B. Gender expression is not about selecting one of two prepackaged identities. Gender expression is a choose your own adventure novel. Your gender is yours and you can express it however you wish. So, at this point, if you're following along with the PowerPoint, you should see a slide that has all of these gendered options in purple, because in actuality, like I have said, you should do what feels comfortable to you. And this might seem confusing. It's like, okay, how am I supposed to figure out my gender if everything is fair game? If everything is genderless, then how am I supposed to understand? And that is a great question. And I think a problem that a lot of, people questioning their gender nowadays are struggling with, like, okay, if everything is fair game, how am I supposed to figure this out? In actuality, there is no clear-cut answer. It's again why this is called navigating gender. There are a bunch of different things that go into someone's gender identity, how they view themselves, how they feel comfortable, the society they were raised in, all of these different things. I think something that is important to note is that throughout this journey, it might be confusing. It might be something that's not easy. And you might, find yourself trying to fit yourself into a box. And if you feel comfortable, in something that is strict and uniform, that is totally fine. There are plenty, especially with binary transgender people, there are plenty of people who like fitting into the opposite of what they were raised as. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you also, based on any gender, any sexuality, you might find that expression is more comfy one way or the other, or a mix, a combination of the two. So I think that something's really important at this point, and this is another break section, is going back to, where is it? The what is gender pages, reading that again, thinking about, okay, if everything is fair game, what makes me happy? If, if you don't have to fit yourself into a box, okay, I'm going to do what makes me happy. And if there's a label that makes you happy, if there's an expression that makes you happy, if there are mannerisms and pronouns and a name that makes you happy, then you should do that. And you don't have to explain yourself to anyone. And I think that's another really good takeaway. And we're going to touch on that when you come back. But right now it is time for another break. So take some time, think about that, go back, look at the packet, reread, and then come back here when you're ready. All right. So now that you're back, hope you had a nice break. Talking about how it's all about what makes you feel comfortable. For me, when I first came out as a transgender man, I was trying to, at least visually, fit into what I thought manhood looked like. Only wearing men's clothes, not wearing feminine jewelry, not having feminine self-expression. But I've always been comfortable with my feminine physical mannerisms, the way that I talk, the way that the inflection in my voice is very much similar to someone who was assigned female at birth. That's something that I've always been comfortable with. And so I kept it. I've never tried to change it. I don't have any plans to try to change it. But that doesn't take away from the fact that, no, I am a man, because gender is all about how you feel, how you identify, and, living as people say, your authentic self. But the only way you're going to figure that out, you're going to figure out, okay, what's comfortable, what's not uncomfortable, is experiment, 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 which is the slide that we're currently on with the PowerPoint. The gender exploration checklist. There is a short version on the PowerPoint, and then there's a longer version in your packet. And as part of this workshop, this is your homework. You don't have to do it, obviously, if you don't want to, but something that may be useful. Clothing. Swap clothes with your friends who have a different gender identity or gender expression than you. Go to the store to buy inexpensive clothes. That way you can try them on. Mix and match feminine and masculine clothes. See what looks good. See what feels good. See what is affirming to how you feel and makes you feel the most at home in your body. Makeup, borrow makeup from a friend if you don't have some of your own. Take turns doing your own makeup, or take turns with your friends doing each other's makeup. You can go to the grocery store to buy inexpensive makeup if you'd like to buy it and try. You can also mix and match feminine and masculine styles and looks. That you can follow YouTube tutorials. There are so many YouTube tutorials about different feminine and masculine makeup looks. As far as pronouns and names, talk to your friends about trying out different pronouns for you. This can be online, this can be through text, this can be in small groups if you don't want to do this in public. If you'd rather do it in public, get some friends who are supportive and do it. Same thing with name, trying out different ones with friends. Refer to yourself in third person in the mirror. Try using different names and pronouns, seeing which ones you like. Something that, some people find really helpful when it comes to names or pronouns, specifically names, is write down different names for yourself in a journal or on a piece of paper. Try different handwriting styles, different fonts, different colors, different variations. See what you like writing. See what sounds good. See what feels good to you. And have that kind of exploration. And then journaling. Do anything that I've just previously mentioned or anything else, and keep a journal. Keep a note of, okay, I just did this thing. This is how it felt. It'll be useful for you to look back on when you're older as nostalgia, but it'll also help you be able to see, on a piece of paper, okay, this is what feels good to me. This is what doesn't, this is what feels good at this time, and then it doesn't feel good at this time. Going through that, exploring that, seeing how that changes over time, revisiting these activities and doing all of those kinds of things. But, with that, there are resources at the back of this packet. There's the Gender Quest workbook with a free PDF download. This is another great workbook to go through. Offers a lot of resources, a lot more, one-on-one kind of activities that you can do by yourself to kind of navigate your gender and your gender exploration. This is a book that I was given during my gender therapy when I was 17. And I think it's a great resource for everyone. There is also mypronouns.org, not .com. And this, offers, resources and learning opportunities about pronouns, specifically neopronouns, if you're interested in that. And then there is It's Pronounced Metrosexual, which this website has a multitude of resources, guides, explainers, and so much more. The terms you may not know is kind of the My Pronouns, It's Pronounced Metrosexual light version. Then this was curated by me. But those websites are amazing resources, and I would recommend them so highly. My last little bit here for this presentation. Again, my name is Aislinn Kent. A link to my website and my email is going to be in the description. Normally when you do a workshop, you have a physical presenter in front of you. You can interact with someone directly and have questions answered. Fortunately, that is not what this medium is. However, you can reach out to me and ask questions. I consider myself an educator and an activist, and I love doing this kind of stuff. So with all of that being said, thank you so much for participating. I hope you got something out of this. And if you would like, you can also check out the other workshop that is on this channel, which is the Transgender Education Workshop. Thank you so much. Have a good day.